It all started on a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where you just want to enjoy your coffee and maybe get some work done in peace. I was out by my barn, cleaning up a few tools and checking on the new fence I'd been putting up. Everything seemed normal until I saw flashing lights pull into my driveway. A police cruiser. I froze. I hadn't called anyone. Nothing was wrong. But when I walked over, I was met with something straight out of a drama. My neighbor, yep, the infamous HOA Karen, standing there with her arms crossed, already mid-rant. Now, to give you some quick context, Karen has always had something to say about my property. Too loud, too messy, too non-compliant with HOA rules, whatever that means for a barn that's been on this land way before she ever moved in. But calling the cops? That was new. She told the officer I had illegally constructed a building and that she was certain there were safety violations. Her tone? Pure authority, like she thought she owned the whole block. But what she didn't know, what she never expected, was that this time, her own son was about to flip the whole thing upside down. See, while she was accusing me of breaking laws, her teenage son was actually inside my barn. And no, I didn't invite him. He'd been sneaking around, and this time I had him on camera. The cops hadn't even stepped inside when I pulled out the footage. You should have seen the look on her face when I showed it to them. But here's where it gets wild, and honestly, a bit messy. Because what happened next turned this whole situation into something way bigger than just a neighbor dispute. Let's just say the truth came out, but not the way anyone expected. Now, before I get to what happened after the cops saw that footage, let me take a step back and explain how we even got to this point, because trust me, this didn't happen overnight. Karen moved in about a year ago. The moment her family settled into the corner house with the freshly painted shutters, she started walking the neighborhood like she was on patrol. At first, it was just the little things. Comments about lawn height, passive-aggressive notes left on mailboxes. But with me, it escalated fast. Why? Because I had a barn. The barn's been on this property for decades. It belonged to my granddad, and I've been restoring it bit by bit. It's not just a storage shed. It's where I keep tools, supplies, and even some personal keepsakes. The place means something to me. But Karen never cared about that. She claimed it was an eyesore and constantly said it brought down property value. Then the HOA started getting complaints. Wonder who sent those? Even though I'd passed every inspection and had full documentation showing the barn was grandfathered in, she wouldn't let it go. The weird part? Every time she complained, her teenage son would be wandering somewhere nearby. I started noticing little things, items slightly out of place, tools missing, the motion sensor light going off at random. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. But something didn't sit right. So I installed a small security camera. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep an eye on things. And that's when I caught him. Karen's son had been sneaking into the barn when no one was around, sometimes just to look, other times to mess around. But on the day she brought the cops to my doorstep, I had fresh footage showing him inside. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more awkward. But here's the kicker. What the camera caught that day wasn't just trespassing. It showed something else. Something Karen really didn't want anyone to see. The footage didn't just show her son sneaking in. It showed him opening an old storage chest I kept tucked in the back, one that hadn't been touched in years. He wasn't just exploring, he was looking for something. And he seemed like he knew what he was looking for. That's when things started feeling off. Why would a teenage kid break into someone's barn just to go through a bunch of dusty, old stuff? And how did he even know where that chest was? I didn't bring that up right away. The cop was still processing the fact that the kid was clearly trespassing. Karen was stumbling over her words, trying to act shocked, saying, "He's never been in there before." But the footage said otherwise. Multiple times, different days, and always heading straight for that same corner. So now I'm thinking, was this really just a nosy kid doing dumb things? Or was there more to it? And then I remembered something else. A couple of months back, I caught Karen in front of the barn, just standing there. She said she was just passing through, but she'd been staring at the side wall, almost like she was measuring something. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now, it feels different. I started piecing things together. Karen never cared about the barn until after her son started hanging around it. She pushed the HOA to come after me, sent in complaints, called in the cops, maybe trying to get the place inspected or shut down. Was this about property lines? Some kind of hidden boundary issue? Or maybe something way more personal? That chest. Her son was digging through. It's filled with old land records, photos, and a few of my grandfather's personal notes. Stuff no one should know about except my family. But somehow Karen's kid did, and that's when I started wondering, what exactly does she really want with my barn? After that day with the cops, things didn't calm down. They got worse. Karen stopped speaking to me directly, but I could feel the tension every time I stepped outside. She'd be watching from her porch or slowly driving by like she was taking notes. And her son, gone. Like completely vanished from the neighborhood. No bike rides, no skateboarding down the street like he usually did. It was like they were hiding something, or covering something up. I couldn't stop thinking about that chest in the barn. I went back and looked through everything again. That's when I found it. An envelope tucked behind a loose panel at the bottom. Inside were some old letters written by my grandfather, and one of them mentioned a dispute with the original owners of Karen's property. Something about land boundaries and a buried survey marker that was never officially updated. The letter ended with, "One day, someone's gonna come looking for this." That line hit me hard. Could that be what Karen was after? Was this whole thing about land? If that survey marker proves my property line extends further than anyone thought, it could mean a chunk of her yard actually belongs to me. That would explain the sudden obsession with getting my barn torn down. No barn, no history, no questions. But the weirdest part? One of the old photos in the envelope showed Karen's house, back when it was just a field, and someone standing near where the barn is now. I didn't recognize the man in the photo, but he had the same sharp jawline as her son. It looked like family. Which begs the question, does she even know the full story? Or is someone else pulling the strings? I decided to keep digging. But just when I thought I had things under control, I got a notice taped to my front door. An official HOA warning, this time with legal threats. They weren't just trying to shut me down, they were trying to erase something, and I was getting too close. The HOA notice wasn't just some printed letter. This one had legal weight behind it. It claimed that not only was the barn out of compliance, but that it posed a potential safety hazard to the community and needed to be dismantled within 30 days. 30 days to tear down a building that had stood for generations. I knew right away this wasn't just a coincidence. Someone was pushing hard from behind the scenes. I tried calling the HOA office, but every time I asked for details, they danced around my questions. When I asked who had filed the complaint, they wouldn't. Tell me, said it was confidential. But then something strange happened. Later that night, I saw someone near my barn again. This time, I caught them before they could run. It wasn't Karen's son. It was a man I'd never seen before, maybe in his 40s, wearing a hoodie and gloves. When I called out, he froze for a second, then bolted through the trees before I could get a clear look at his face. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Karen, or her son, or even the HOA. Someone else had a stake in this barn. Someone who clearly didn't want me digging through old records and finding out what was buried here, figuratively, and maybe literally. And, judging by how quickly that man took off, they knew I was getting close. I went back into the barn, double-checking everything, and found something I hadn't noticed before. The floorboards beneath the chest had been scratched. Recently. Like someone had tried to lift them up. I pulled out a flashlight and pried one loose. Underneath was dirt, and something else. A corner of what looked like a metal box. Just as I reached down, I heard a car door slam outside. More headlights. More voices. Not the cops this time, at least not yet. But someone was back, and they weren't knocking. I didn't move. I just crouched there with my hand hovering over the edge of that metal box, heart pounding, listening to the footsteps crunching over gravel. Whoever was outside wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. They were heading straight for the barn fast. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and stood up just as the door swung open. It was Karen, and right behind her, the same man who'd been sneaking around the night before. Her face was pale, but her eyes were locked on the floor like she already knew what I'd found. "Step away from that," she snapped, her voice shaking. The man stepped forward like he was going to take the box himself, but I raised my phone. "I'm filming this. You take one more step, and this goes straight to the sheriff." That stopped him. Karen looked at me, then at the box, then let out a breath like she'd been holding it for years. "That doesn't belong to you," she said. "It was supposed to be buried." I opened the box anyway. Inside were old papers, deeds, handwritten notes, even a faded map. One document was a revised land agreement from decades ago that showed a split in property ownership. It proved that a portion of Karen's lot, and maybe even the house itself, had been built on land that legally still belonged to my family. Her family must have known about it and covered it up. That explained everything. The complaints, the police, the break-ins. They weren't trying to protect the neighborhood. They were trying to erase evidence. But here's the twist. As I was going through the papers, one photo slipped out. It was of my grandfather, standing with another man I didn't recognize at first. Then I looked closer. It was the same man standing in front of me. Karen's friend. He wasn't her friend. He was her father. And that's when I realized this wasn't about the barn. It was about rewriting family history. And I had just uncovered the truth they'd spent years trying to bury. The truth hit like a punch. Karen's father, who'd been creeping around my barn, was the one who had worked with my grandfather all those years ago. But somewhere along the way, something happened. Greed, maybe, or pride. He had forged a new version of the land agreement after my grandfather passed, hiding the original, then built on land that was never legally his. Karen must have grown up with that secret buried, literally and emotionally. When I started restoring the barn, it stirred everything up. Once I had the documents and footage, I handed everything over to a real estate attorney and the local authorities. The response was slow but steady. Karen backed off completely. The HOA dropped all threats, and the legal process for correcting the property line started moving. Turns out my barn stood exactly where it was supposed to, on land that was always mine. And now I had the paperwork to prove it. As for Karen's son, I actually saw him again a few weeks later. He came by quietly and apologized, said he never knew the full story and thought he was helping his mom. Honestly, I believed him. He was just a kid caught in something way bigger than he understood. The barn's still standing, stronger than ever. I finished the repairs and turned part of it into a small history corner with photos and stories from my grandfather's time. What started as a headache with the HOA turned into a deeper connection to my roots, and a reminder that sometimes people will go to great lengths to protect a lie. But truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild story. I've got more real-life drama coming soon, because around here, things are never quiet for long.